this way I see there is still a light in me. Carry onward thankfully, and let the light see what it sees.
Well, welcome, River. It's great that we have this opportunity for a conversation. The way this conversation arose, River and I were both invited to the Goetheanum at the Michaelmas Conference, which has just ended today, and we were asked to speak on a panel on gender, which is a topic that has lived with both of us for many, many years. River, you presented some of your thoughts, and of course we didn't have long, and I presented one particular thought that interested me, but we never really got a chance to dialogue and to bring those thoughts into relationship with one another, and the opportunity has arisen. So thank you for coming along for this.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy for the opportunity, and thanks to Ariel for the brilliant idea and kind of catching this last moment before we flip back away to our different current locations.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think it was a really wonderful thing that was done at the Goetheanum for this World Conference, and I could see an evolution even from when I was here and working with the youth section to open up and bring in some of the world questions that are living not only in the Anthroposophical movement but in humanity. And so I was really excited to even see that gender was there on the thematic in these thematic forums, and in the way that it was designed. The panelists, which we were on one of the panels for one of the days, were set up in a way to sort of plant a seed thought for the whole group to then go on into a smaller conversation groups. So it's a lot to bring together into a little summary. But regardless, still exciting that the topic was here for the weekend. And let's see, I guess I'll say, coming from an American context, before I arrived at the conference, I thought that I was going to bring something different about gender. Gender fluidity and transgender questions. What is gender? These are big questions in the US right now, culturally, socially, also politically. And I kind of was ready to drop those kind of big things into the Goetheanum context. Everywhere is a little bit in a different place with these questions, and it's not as alive in this part of Central Europe as it is in the US. So I guess I'll say I in some ways scaled back maybe what I wanted to bring, but in conversations in between the organized sessions, I found that there were there was a lot of fertile ground, I guess, for me to bring my work, and there were a lot of people that came to me to ask more questions and who are also living with these questions.
So what you ended up bringing was something around terminology.
So this is something that my wife and I talk about a lot just between us, because we have bookshelves full of Steiner's literature and secondary literature, that's been translated, and maybe they were translated in the 50s or the 60s or the 90s, or even in the last 10 years. And I'm so delighted by the content, the spiritual content that's there, and I want it, I'm reading because I want to be inspired, I want to learn. And it's still very often that in the literature, when there's a passage that's speaking about a generic person, it's not a specific person like Ita Wegman. Okay, it's very easy. You talk about Ita Wegman, and later in the sentence you say, and she, started the Ita Wegman clinic. But in a lot of Steiner's writings, so he's talking about the general, the human being, and on the human being's spiritual path, the human being might come to the threshold. And in a lot of literature it says, man, the man comes to the threshold and he is encountering different parts of his soul. Okay, as a just clunky example.
Yeah.
And one part of, I guess what I'm wishing to see is that that we can, in 2023, at least in English publications, I can't really speak as much to how that might go about in other languages or non-English speaking places. I don't want to speak about what I don't know. But in English speaking places where people are wanting to engage with anthroposophical literature, so Hannah and I we translate in the moment if we're reading out loud to each other, if I'm reading in my own head. So I take a passage that has man and he and this, and I change it to gender neutral language, and that's human being is a easily accessible, alternate to man, humankind instead of mankind. And you can either, choose to alternate, like in your own head, he, she, her soul is blah, blah, blah. But I really take it to the next, what I really think is the future, and is needed, and use they as a pronoun, because then it's all inclusive.
Yeah.
It doesn't leave out anyone, and I find it's much more inviting.
Yeah. And it was interesting because although we were bringing very different things, there was an interesting connection, because one of the thoughts that I was working with was this reality that the anthroposophical path of initiation and development for the human being is actually in this schooling for all people. And that's a very unusual thing. If you look at, other traditions, if you go into far and wide, whether it's in Catholicism or Buddhism or ancient schoolings, there are very few places where all are invited to walk the same initiation path, and that they're not divided into their genders or given roles because of certain things. And so we see that in the Hibernian mysteries, which comes out of Ireland, which Steiner also referred to as being part of the initiation of the future. And we see that in the heart of anthroposophy. And so you're right, you use this word, like he arrives at the threshold, but it's an initiation for all people. So how do we make sure that speaks to everyone? Now, some of us find it easy to do that in a translation. And I know myself, I'm reading out and I'm constantly translating it as I go along into the whole picture.
Yeah.
Because it's in a way where we're inviting many people in. But there's a few things that really interest me that I thought we could talk about. One of those is that on the initiation path that it includes all people, we are really awakening to this I consciousness first, which of its nature is the unlimited, liberated, free self. And the moment we go into gender, we're actually speaking about a limited, unfree part of ourselves, because you're living with a particular reality, even the reality that you sit in that chair and I sit in this chair, in the realm of matter, there's going to be these separations, and yet when we go to this I consciousness, that anybody has that experience of that free I, knowing that everyone holds that free I, you feel this absolute unity, and at the same time in your a freedom like never before. So we are talking about, in a way, on one hand, speaking to the unfree part of ourselves when we're trying to be inclusive. And what interests me is that for some people, their incarnation as a male or female is incredibly important to them. And for others, it's really not the important thing. And this is where I think some of the, for those that it's really not important, they may find it harder to go to the greater terms, but maybe not. It's also maybe those that find it really important want to find the new terms. So what I found over the years of working with people, for some people, their identity in this bodily experience is a very important thing, and they want to hold it and assert it and work into life being seen in it. And for others, they actually don't want to hold it, don't want to assert it, and actually don't want to be seen in it. And regardless of whether you're looking at male, female, and I'm in a female body and want to be asserted as a female, or in an experience of trans and want to be asserted as trans, and then others in that experience don't want it, in both categories. And that really interests me. There are some people that come into the world really needing to embody the identity of a particular incarnation, and for others it appears that something else is more active. And so, I wondered what you've met in that, and also does that cause part of the difficulty, because we can't ask the world to do something that is not important for everyone, or can we ask the world? And in a certain sense, you could say that we've been asking the world to do something that is a certain way, unconsciously, by the he term. I remember when I was young and I was taught how to write a formal letter. It started like this: Dear Sirs. That's how you wrote a formal letter. And so we made that agreement, and it wasn't important for everyone. So we can make new agreements. So what do you think about that, given that that was part of what I was looking at, the initiation path, and I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Good question. Good questions. So I, where to start? Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I guess the short version is that something, even if it's something that is very important for not maybe all of humanity, but very important for some, what I'm first thinking about is how we can just be compassionate, human colleagues to one another, and that there are thousands of different examples or topics of something that may be really important to one person or a group of people that maybe it's not important to me, but out of my love and respect for others, I'm interested in hearing why it's important for them, and then maybe I get behind supporting whatever that important thing is. And yeah, this did come up in an afternoon conversation that I had, and it was a realization, or maybe a reminder for me, that while I feel passionately about the words and pronouns that are used in publications, and I feel very passionately about everyone, not only in the Anthroposophical movement, understanding much more about what's going on with gender. It's not a burning question for everyone, and that's totally okay. I think I guess what I hope is that out of kind of doing this research, and you've done so much research already in the male and the female and the masculine and the feminine, and how previous incarnations may be playing into our experiences right on the earth as a man or a woman, and where does this research go from there in this modern current moment of seeing many, many more people wondering about what does it mean to live in the world with a concept of gender, what does it mean to live in the world in a certain body, and I think it's exciting to consider just what does it mean about human evolution in a lot of ways. And what's really clear is that there's a lot of questions and there aren't answers yet. And I really think as a humanity we will work towards something akin to answers through the process of investigating, how do you experience these things? How does someone else experience them? And what has changed for humanity that is also a piece of the answer of, the need for gender fluidity and like you were saying before, that freedom, right? Opening up much more broader, bigger spaces for each individual to be themselves in their particular way, where we don't keep each other in boxes out of these, social conditioning or norms, expectations, that's what has been harmful in the past, and it is still harmful.
Yeah.
In that way, I do think it's important to every human being, honestly, alive, that we can keep freeing each other, freeing ourselves from a specific idea of what does it mean to be a man or what does it mean to be a woman. I don't think anyone really knows. And as you were just speaking to, it's it differs based on, what am I here doing right now? What do I need to learn and also give? And that's going to be really different from person to person.
Yeah. And one of the thoughts that I brought was the fact that when Rudolf Steiner was around, some of his thoughts around gender were incredibly radical for his time, over 100 years ago. And I've got one of them here from Philosophy of Freedom. It just says, what women are capable of, according to their nature, should be left for women to decide. And anyone who fears the cataclysm in our social conditions, if women are accepted not as generic entities but as individuals, should be told that social conditions in which half of humanity leads, for which one half of humanity leads to an existence unworthy of human beings, are conditions that stand in great need of improvement. Now, 100 years ago, that was so important.
Yeah.
And yet, my question was, where is those pioneering thoughts arising now out of anthroposophy? Because it is a schooling of initiation. It is about bringing us forward, supporting humanity's steps forward. So I think some of the things that we are working with are really essential. And I also feel the inquiry into the new generations that are coming and how we understand that spiritually is really important, because it is, for me, showing something that's happening on a much wider scale. Because we're given this image that humanity is crossing that threshold. And when we cross the threshold at night, we move into this genderless world. And we're not male or female in that realm of being, in our divine spiritual state. And yet we come back into this bodily vehicle and we have to live out a very different existence in this material presentation. And now it appears in this humanity's shift that the unborn, those that are coming, and the communities are in a more dynamic relationship with one another. I think I mentioned to you that I had looked at 7 reasons why someone might feel they're in the wrong body and want to make a difference of that. And one of those connects to this reality that the unborn are already in relationship to the living community, and our unconscious need can change the vehicle which they enter into for the community. Mm. But there's another aspect which really interests me, and that is, it used to be that before we reincarnated into the new life, the last incarnation had completely, in a way, dissolved. Mm-hmm. We didn't have an ability to access it unless we had gone through a particular initiation training. And on the path of initiation, it does unfold, that awakens. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 things I'm wondering. As humanity is crossing that threshold, are we getting awakenings of past experiences without us having actually gone through the inner conscious preparation? And the other thing that we're seeing, and was also predicted, is that the memory body of our last incarnation has not fully dissolved because of the way materialism is going, and that we're so, in a way, bound to the earth existence, that when we transit from life into the afterlife, that memory body that stays for some long period of time, which then dissolves itself before your next incarnation, is actually being more, pickled is not quite the right word, but preserved through this force of materialism that is occurring. So that when you're coming back, a young child is connecting to the memory body of their last incarnation. And so they're not the person that they are here. So there are lots of things that I think are really important for us to understand, because the complexity of it can be addressed in a purely sense-born way, and then we miss, I think, the opportunity to discover what's really the reason behind these changes, and it's deeply connected to our spiritual life. And it's deeply connected to the need for humanity to deepen the esotericism, what lives behind the veil of the physical reality, to deepen our understanding about reincarnation and karma, and to recognize that people are having very true experiences, and how would we discover where that experience might be arising from if we're not really to do the real deep spiritual work. And because I think anthroposophy comes from this tradition of all are initiated through the same stream, and it's not a division, it seems right that we do that investigation, because it's not a limited to what was given in the past. And Steiner talks about this as being a very ancient battle between this wisdom that was dualized to some degree, the so-called masculine wisdom and the so-called feminine wisdom. And we see part of it express itself in this formative force and form. Like formative force and form seems to run the world, and it seems to be the wisdom that's one. The other wisdom, which is about process and substance, is not leading the world at the moment. And yet they are archetypally brought in an equal marriage for us to awaken that higher I. And so even in anthroposophy, we've seen, even though when Steiner was around it felt very equal, we've started to see this kind of formative force and form kind of push to be the leading force. How do we reform this? What is the structure? How do we make how do we shape what's coming? These are all terms that belong to a particular way. And the way of process and substance doesn't ask that as a leading question. Of course, in the unitedness, we don't want just empty forms. We want forms that are filled with substance. And so, when I finished talking, someone said to me, was that successful? Oh, that's such an interesting question. Of course, that's a question that will come straight at me, because that's what we say. We're so ingrained in a particular type of wisdom that we'll even say, was that successful? Whereas I might say something like, did you land what you felt you needed to land, or did you serve what you intended to serve? Very different question. And so I don't think we realise quite how much that there is a one-sided wisdom at play, and it doesn't really belong in a schooling that has actually declared it is for a unified wisdom. So I feel like the more we can go deep into this gender question, not in just the way it's manifested in the physical, but how it actually manifests in the way of which we even give room to a particular type of wisdom. Because somehow we know it's still not whole.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that develop much further. And this is something that is a rarity for all human beings to be invited to the same initiation path. And it has its task, and it's not to say that there are initiation paths where it's just for men and just for women don't have their place in the task, but this has its task. So to be true in a way to the body of knowledge that has been offered us would be to really investigate that wholeness of wisdom.
Walking home this way I see there is still a light in me. Carry on.